The discovery. The stars twinkled in the black void of space as the alien vessel, Vrexar, glided silently through the cosmos. Commander Zarin stood at the bridge, his sharp eyes scanning the vast emptiness ahead. The Zarnok Dominion, a powerful alien empire, had conquered countless planets across the galaxy, but today they were on a mission unlike any other. They had stumbled upon a forgotten world, a world that had been left alone for centuries. Earth. Zarin had heard legends about Earth. Some spoke of it as a dead planet, once teeming with life, now abandoned and silent. Others told stories of a great and ancient power hidden beneath its surface. The Zarnok were curious, always looking for new technologies to fuel their war machine. Earth, with its forgotten past, seemed like the perfect place to discover something valuable. As the Vrexar approached Earth's atmosphere, the crew remained silent. The hum of the ship's engines was the only sound that filled the room. Zarin could feel the excitement building in the pit of his stomach. He had been tasked with finding ancient technologies, and Earth, according to the data they had received, held the key to something incredible. The ship slowly entered Earth's orbit, and Zarin stared out the window, taking in the sight of the blue and green planet below. It looked peaceful, almost too peaceful for a planet that had once been home to a civilization that could rival even the Zarnok's might. He could almost feel the weight of the planet's history in the air. "Commander Zarin, we have detected a strange energy signal coming from beneath the surface of the planet," one of the officers reported, breaking Zarin's thoughts. "It's unlike anything we've ever encountered before." Zarin's curiosity piqued. Where exactly is it coming from? Coordinates locked. It seems to be originating from an ancient structure, deep underground, near what appears to be a ruined city. The officer's voice wavered slightly, as if he couldn't quite believe what he was seeing. Zarin's interest deepened. Earth was full of secrets, and now, it seemed, it was about to reveal one of its most guarded ones. "Set course for the coordinates," Zarin ordered firmly. "Prepare for a landing. I want every detail analyzed." The Vrexar adjusted its trajectory, heading toward the coordinates that had been pinpointed. As they descended through Earth's atmosphere, the ship shuddered, but Zarin remained calm. The alien vessel was built to withstand even the harshest environments. Soon, the ship landed just outside the ruins of what had once been a great city. As the crew disembarked, Zarin couldn't shake the feeling that they were on the edge of a monumental discovery. The ruined city around them was unlike anything he had ever seen before. Giant, crumbling structures stretched into the sky, and the air smelled of old metal and dust. There were no signs of life, not even plants or animals, only the remnants of a once great civilization. "Commander, over here," one of the officers called out, his voice echoing in the empty space. Zarin walked over to the officer, who was standing in front of a large metal door partially buried in the rubble. Strange symbols were etched into the surface, glowing faintly in the dim light. The officer stood back, allowing Zarin to examine it closely. The symbols seemed to resonate with an energy he couldn't explain, almost as if the door itself was alive. This door was meant to keep something in, or something out," Zarin muttered, his voice low and filled with awe. "Should we attempt to open it, Commander?" the officer asked hesitantly. Zarin nodded. "Yes, we can't leave without seeing what's behind it." The officer activated a control panel, and after a few moments, the door slowly groaned open. The air that rushed out was cold, filled with the smell of age and neglect. The room beyond was dark, but as Zarin stepped forward, his eyes adjusted, revealing rows of what looked like dormant machines, powered down after centuries of disuse. This is incredible," Zarin whispered. "What kind of civilization built this?" He moved closer to one of the machines. It was large, metallic, and covered in layers of dust. The strange symbols that adorned the surface of the door were also etched into the machines. Zarin's hands trembled slightly as he reached out to touch the surface of the machine. The moment his fingers made contact, a low hum filled the room. "Commander," one of the officers shouted, It's starting to power up. Zarin stepped back quickly, but his eyes never left the machine. The humming grew louder, and lights flickered to life across the room. The machines were coming online. Slowly, one by one, they began to activate, their systems waking from centuries of dormancy. The room suddenly filled with a bright, blinding light as the main machine in the center of the room powered up fully. A voice, ancient and mechanical, echoed in the chamber. "Welcome, travelers. You have discovered the legacy of Earth's last hope. Prepare yourselves." Zarin froze. This was no ordinary machine. The voice was alive, aware, and it was speaking to them. "Prepare for what?" Zarin demanded, his voice sharp. "Who are you?" The voice did not answer directly, but the lights above them flickered, and the temperature in the room dropped suddenly. The air felt thick, charged with energy. It was as if the machines were waiting for something, waiting for the right moment to reveal their purpose. Zarin felt a chill run down his spine. He had found what he had been searching for. An ancient, forgotten fleet hidden beneath Earth's surface. But what was its purpose, and why had it been hidden for so long? As the machines continued to hum and the voice echoed through the room, Zarin knew that Earth's ancient fleet held secrets far more dangerous than he had ever imagined. The power within this hidden armada was something beyond the Zarnak's comprehension, and they were only beginning to uncover its true potential. Something had been awakened, and Zarin realized that whatever it was, it would change the fate of the galaxy forever. The awakening. The air in the dark chamber was thick with the hum of ancient technology. Commander Zarin stood frozen, his mind racing. The machines around him, once dormant for countless centuries, had come to life. The eerie mechanical voice echoed once more through the room, its tone cold and powerful. "Warning. Unauthorized access detected. Activation of defensive systems initiated." Zarin's heart skipped a beat. His eyes darted to the machines, now fully awake. The walls around them seemed to tremble with the pulse of energy emanating from the center of the room. This wasn't just a fleet of warships hidden under Earth's surface. It was a weapon, an ancient weapon capable of immense power. "Commander, we need to leave. This is beyond anything we expected," one of the officers said, his voice shaky. Zarin, however, remained calm. His eyes never left the glowing core of the room, where the central machine was pulsing with light. This was no ordinary relic of a lost civilization. It was something much more dangerous. The voice continued, echoing off the walls like a warning. "Prepare for activation. Earth's defense protocols are online. Interlopers detected." The sound of heavy footsteps rang out as the Zarnak soldiers moved to form a protective line around Zarin. Their weapons were raised, but it was clear that they were unsure of what they were facing. The fleet of ships in the room, once silent and lifeless, now seemed to be alive. A low, mechanical growl came from one of the vessels, and its engines sparked to life, glowing a bright blue. "Ready yourselves," Zarin commanded. "We can't retreat now. We've come too far." His crew hesitated for only a moment before nodding in agreement. They couldn't turn back. This discovery was far too significant. Zarin's eyes narrowed as he studied the ships, wondering how the fleet was capable of such power. But before he could fully grasp the situation, something unexpected happened. The voice returned, now more urgent, and with a hint of something almost alive. Energy levels rising. Planetary defense systems engaging. A loud screech filled the air, and the floor beneath their feet suddenly shifted. Zarin's soldiers struggled to stay steady as the ground cracked open, revealing hidden tunnels that led deep into the planet's core. The machines, seemingly connected to these tunnels, began to whir and hum, preparing for something much larger. The entire fleet, every ship, was alive, each one powering up with a deep, resonating energy. "Get ready," Zarin barked. "We need to find the control room." Without waiting for a response, Zarin led his team toward a massive metal door at the far end of the chamber. It was old, covered in layers of dust and grime, but something about it drew him in. The energy from the machines seemed to converge here, as if the door was a gateway to something more. As they approached, the door slowly creaked open on its own, as though inviting them to enter. Inside the room, the floor was covered with a strange metallic dust, and the walls were lined with symbols that glowed faintly in the dim light. Zarin walked cautiously, his boots crunching on the dust beneath him. The machines outside continued to hum with growing intensity, their engines roaring to life. The atmosphere in the room felt charged, as if the air itself was alive with power. In the center of the room stood a large, spherical device, an ancient control panel covered in strange symbols. It was unlike anything Zarin had ever seen. It pulsed with energy, the same blue light that he had seen in the ships. He stepped closer, his hand outstretched. Before he could touch it, a strange sensation washed over him. Something ancient, something not human, but familiar. System restoration complete. Welcome, Commander Zarin. You have activated Earth's final defense. The voice spoke directly to him now, and it sent a chill down his spine. It wasn't just a machine. This was something sentient, aware of their presence. It was as if the very essence of Earth's last defense system was speaking to him, judging him. Who, or what are you? Zarin demanded, his voice low but steady. We are the guardians of Earth, the final shield. You, intruders, have awakened us. Now, we will test your worth. The ground shook again, more violently this time, and the machines outside began to stir. The ships in the room, once merely dormant, now hummed with life, their engines roaring louder. The voice continued, growing more forceful. Prepare, intruders. You have entered Earth's domain, and now you will face the consequences. Zarin's mind raced. These machines, these warships, they weren't just relics of an ancient civilization. They were part of an entire planetary defense system that had been designed to keep Earth safe from outsiders. But why had they been left behind? And why had they been hidden in the first place? The voice, now cold and unyielding, gave Zarin no time to consider these questions. He could feel the pressure building, the air thick with energy, as the machines prepared for battle. Earth's final defense was no longer dormant. It was awake, and it was ready to fight. Move out, Zarin commanded, his voice cutting through the tension. Prepare to fight. We must control these ships, or we will not leave here alive. As his team readied their weapons, the machine's defensive systems activated. The ships began to rise, and the walls of the chamber shifted, revealing hidden turrets and automated weapons. The ancient fleet of Earth had returned, and it was ready to defend its home. Zarin's heart raced. He had come seeking ancient power, but now he had found something far more dangerous than he could have ever imagined. The real battle was just beginning, and he knew that his people might not be prepared for the force they had just unleashed. The fate of the Zarnok Dominion, and possibly the entire galaxy, now rested on the choices they made in this forgotten corner of space. The unforeseen defense. The ground rumbled beneath Zarin's feet as the machines continued to awaken, their mechanical limbs stretching, groaning under the weight of centuries of disuse. The ancient defense system of Earth had been brought back to life, and it was far more formidable than Zarin had anticipated. The glowing blue ships now hovered, ready for combat, and the air crackled with the intensity of the rising energy. Zarin could hear the metallic shriek of engines as they powered up, each ship preparing for the next phase of activation. Zarin's heart raced as his team scrambled to follow his orders. He had never faced an enemy like this before. These weren't just ancient ships. These were Earth's last line of defense, and they had just been given new life. The machines surrounding them were no longer just dormant relics, but active participants in the defense of this world. Commander, we need to fall back, one of the officers shouted, his voice filled with urgency. The defensive systems are too powerful. We are not equipped to handle this. Zarin's mind was working in overdrive, but he knew there was no turning back now. They had discovered something monumental. Earth's forgotten fleet was awakening, and the power within it was beyond anything the Zarnak had ever imagined. "No retreat," Zarin said, his voice steady despite the chaos unfolding around him. "We must control these ships before they destroy us." The officer hesitated for a moment, but then nodded. The team reformed, weapons raised, eyes scanning every corner of the room. The lights above flickered, casting long, eerie shadows across the chamber. The hum of energy grew louder, and Zarin knew that the defense systems were ready to engage. Suddenly, the ground shook again, this time with greater force. A loud mechanical roar filled the room, echoing off the walls as the first ship powered up fully. Its engines flared to life, and the massive craft hovered inches above the ground. It turned, its weapons systems locking onto the Zarnak soldiers. "We've lost control," another officer yelled as the ship's cannons aimed at them. "It's going to fire." Zarin's instincts kicked in. He dove to the side, pulling the officer with him as the ship's cannon fired. A beam of intense energy shot out, slamming into the walls behind them. The room exploded in a blast of heat and debris. Smoke filled the air, and the force of the explosion sent Zarin tumbling across the floor. The crew scrambled to recover, but the blast had scattered them. Zarin rose to his feet, his heart pounding in his chest. His soldiers were recovering quickly, though, and they moved with precision, ready for what was to come next. "We need to shut them down," Zarin muttered to himself. His mind raced, calculating his next move. The machines were autonomous, each one acting independently. But they shared a common purpose: to protect Earth. If they didn't take control soon, the entire fleet would descend upon them, and there would be no escape. As Zarin surveyed the room, he saw something that caught his attention. At the far end of the chamber, a console stood, its lights flickering on and off. It seemed like the central control system, the one that had been powering up Earth's defenses. If he could reach it, maybe, just maybe, he could regain control of the fleet. "Follow me," Zarin barked to his crew. "We head for that console. It's our only chance." The soldiers nodded, rallying behind their commander. They sprinted through the chaos, dodging falling debris and the blinding flashes of energy blasts from the ships above. Zarin led them, moving quickly despite the chaos surrounding them. He could feel the pulse of energy in the air, and with every step, the weight of the situation grew heavier. As they reached the console, Zarin's hands flew across the keys, his mind racing to understand the alien interface. The symbols on the screen were foreign to him, but they seemed to respond to his touch. Each keystroke brought a new layer of information, and slowly, a map of the fleet's systems began to appear on the screen. "Commander, they're locking onto us," one of the officers warned, fear in his voice. "We don't have much time." Zarin's mind worked quickly. The defense systems were about to activate on a larger scale, and if they didn't stop it now, they would be wiped out before they could even put up a fight. His fingers moved rapidly, activating a series of commands to try and override the system. The lights above them flickered again, this time pulsing more erratically. For a brief moment, the machines halted, and Zarin's heart skipped a beat. Could it be? Was he actually gaining control? Then, without warning, the voice returned, colder than before. "Unauthorized override detected. Defense systems activated. Intruders will be eliminated." Before Zarin could react, the ground beneath them trembled violently. The door to the control room slammed shut with a deafening crash, trapping them inside. The walls started to pulse with energy, and the air grew thick with tension. The entire room felt like it was alive, reacting to their presence. A mechanical hum filled the air as the massive ships outside began to descend, their cannons charging once more. The fleet was gearing up for battle. Earth's defenses had been fully activated, and now they were on a collision course with the Zarnak invaders. "We're running out of time," one officer yelled, his voice panicked. Zarin turned to face his crew, his expression grim. They were trapped. The fleet was ready for combat, and Earth's final defense was about to destroy them. He took a deep breath, steeling himself. "This is not over," Zarin said, his voice firm. "We will find a way to take control. We must." But even as he spoke, he knew that the odds were stacking higher and higher against them. They had woken something ancient, something more powerful than they could have ever imagined. And now they had to face the consequences of their actions. The machines outside were preparing for war, and the Zarnak were about to face Earth's wrath. Zarin realized they were not just fighting for control of an ancient fleet, they were fighting for their very survival. The first strike. The walls of the chamber seemed to pulse with a steady rhythmic thrum. Zarin stood frozen, his hand still resting on the console as the voice echoed in the room. His eyes darted to his crew, his soldiers, who now seemed less like trained warriors and more like helpless bystanders in the face of Earth's might. He knew they couldn't give up. Not yet, but the weight of the situation was crushing. Outside, the ancient ships hovered, their engines glowing brightly. The ship that had fired upon them earlier now hung ominously in the air, its weapons aimed directly at the control room. The Zarnak soldiers took cover, weapons raised, their nerves on edge. "Commander, they're preparing to fire again," one of the officers said, his voice tight with fear. Zarin took a deep breath, steadying himself. The console in front of him flickered, displaying a new series of commands. The systems were overwhelming, alien in every sense. But there was something about it, something Zarin could almost feel, that told him this wasn't just a weapon. It was an entire defensive system, designed to protect Earth from any and all threats. His eyes narrowed as he saw a new line of text appear on the console. Firing sequence. Final phase. Planetary destruction imminent. The words hit him like a physical blow. The defensive system wasn't just preparing to fight, it was preparing to destroy. "We need to stop them before they fire again," Zarin barked, his voice sharp and commanding. But as soon as he spoke, the first strike came. The ground shook with a deafening roar, and Zarin's world seemed to explode in a flash of white light. The energy beam shot down from the ship, its intensity so great that it cracked the walls around them. Zarin dove to the floor as debris rained down from above. The force of the blast knocked him backward, his vision blurred for a moment. The room was filled with smoke and the deafening sound of machinery at full power. "Is everyone okay?" Zarin shouted, his voice hoarse. His crew groaned and staggered to their feet, some of them shaking their heads in confusion. One officer, her face streaked with dust, checked her weapons before looking at Zarin with wide, fearful eyes. "The system is still active," she said. "We're not out of danger yet." Zarin nodded. The ship outside had fired, but it wasn't over. They had to act quickly. The fleet was gearing up for more strikes. The entire planetary defense system was on the verge of launching an all-out assault. "We need to find the heart of the system," Zarin said. "There's a main control somewhere. If we can access it, we can shut everything down." His team moved quickly, scanning the room for any signs of the control room's location. The energy from the ships outside surged through the walls, making the floor beneath their feet feel like it was alive. Zarin's mind raced. The ships were ready to launch another round of attacks, but they needed a way to stop them before the entire planet was destroyed. "We're running out of time," one of the soldiers said, his voice panicked. Zarin shot him a glare. He couldn't let fear set in now. The stakes were too high. They had to find the control room, and they had to find it fast. As they moved deeper into the chamber, Zarin's eyes caught something. It was faint, almost imperceptible, but there was a slight shimmer in the air ahead of them. It looked like a door, hidden behind a layer of dust and debris. "There," Zarin shouted, pointing to the shimmer. "That's it." The crew moved swiftly, pushing through the rubble and debris. The air grew colder as they approached the hidden door, and the hum of the machines outside grew louder. The tension in the room was unbearable. Zarin reached out and pressed his hand against the door. It slid open with a low, groaning sound, revealing a narrow corridor that led deeper into the heart of the system. The walls were lined with glowing symbols, more complex and intricate than anything Zarin had ever seen. He could feel the pulse of power in the air. "Stay alert," Zarin said. "We don't know what we're going to find inside." They moved forward, the air growing colder as they descended deeper into the facility. Each step seemed to echo, the sound of their boots on the metal floor ringing in the silence. The energy in the chamber seemed to grow stronger with every passing moment. Finally, they'd reached the end of the corridor. Before them stood a large, circular chamber, its walls lined with more of the glowing symbols. At the center of the room was a massive console, far larger and more complex than anything they had seen before. It was the heart of the system, the final piece of Earth's defense mechanism. But as Zarin approached, a voice boomed through the chamber, cold and unforgiving. "Intruders detected. Defense protocols activated. All systems engage." Zarin's blood ran cold. It was too late. The final defense system was fully online. The machines outside had finished powering up, and now there was no turning back. The first ship outside fired again. The energy beam slammed into the ground just outside the chamber, shaking the entire room. Zarin's soldiers ducked for cover, but Zarin remained standing, his eyes fixed on the massive console. This was it. They had no choice now but to fight their way through. He stepped forward, his hand hovering over the console. The ancient text on the screen began to flash, faster now, more intense. He had to act fast. "Prepare to hold off the attack," Zarin yelled to his team. "I'm going to try to override the system. Stay with me." With a deep breath, he pressed a button on the console. The symbols on the screen shifted, and the ground beneath them trembled. The energy began to flow into the console, and the entire room lit up with bright, blinding light. The last stand. The ground beneath Zarin's feet shuddered as the console's power surged. The blinding light that had filled the room was beginning to flicker and dim, but the threat was still ever present. Zarin could feel the intensity of the machines outside, their cannons charging up again. The ancient fleet had completely activated, and the planet's defense system was now fully operational. The Zarnak were outmatched. It was clear that Earth had built these weapons for an enemy far worse than them. Zarin's fingers danced over the controls, his mind working furiously to decode the alien symbols on the screen. He didn't have much time. The ships outside were already preparing for another strike, and this time there would be no warning. "Commander, we're not going to make it," one of his officers shouted. His voice trembled with fear as he watched another beam of energy light up the sky. The air grew heavier with each passing second. "Stay focused," Zarin barked back. "We are not giving up. We have to get control of this system, or we're all dead." The console in front of him seemed to pulse, responding to his touch. The symbols shifted, becoming more familiar to him as he continued to work. It was clear that the system had a defense mechanism of its own, one that would prevent unauthorized access. But Zarin wasn't about to let that stop him. He had to take control. If he didn't, Earth's ancient fleet would obliterate them all. "We need more time," Zarin called out. "Prepare to defend this room. If the fleet fires again, it's all over." The officers scattered, positioning themselves around the chamber as the ship outside took aim once more. The tension in the air was thick. Zarin's heart raced, and for a moment he doubted himself. Had they made a mistake? Were they too late? Earth's fleet was far more powerful than they had ever anticipated. But then he remembered why they were there. He remembered the stakes. Earth's fleet wasn't just a defense system. It was a symbol. It was the last line of protection for a world that had been forgotten by the stars. And now it was up to Zarin to find a way to protect it. He quickly scanned the console again. A new line of text appeared, flashing red. "Override successful. Commencing shutdown sequence." Zarin's breath caught in his throat. He was in. The system was acknowledging his command. "Hold on," he shouted. "I've got it." The shutdown is starting. Just as the words left his mouth, another energy beam shot toward the control room, slamming into the walls just behind Zarin. The blast sent shockwaves through the chamber, knocking everyone off their feet. Zarin gritted his teeth, pushing forward despite the chaos. The floor beneath them cracked, sending debris falling from the ceiling. The control console flickered and buzzed, but Zarin refused to stop. He slammed his hand down on a red button, sending a pulse of energy through the entire system. The ground rumbled as a deep hum filled the room, signaling that the shutdown sequence was now in motion. "We're almost there," Zarin muttered to himself. His hands were shaking, but he couldn't stop now. Suddenly, the doors to the chamber slammed shut, and the lights flickered off, plunging them into darkness. Zarin's heart raced as he heard the distant sound of more energy blasts. They weren't just fighting for control anymore. They were fighting to survive. "Commander, the machines are closing in," one of the officers said urgently, her voice full of panic. "We don't have much time." Zarin's mind raced. The machines were still operating, and the fleet was still a threat. But with the shutdown sequence underway, there was hope. They could still prevent the destruction. The console flickered back to life, and the words on the screen shifted again. Defense systems disengaging. Fleet movement paused. A wave of relief washed over Zarin, but it was short-lived. He knew this wasn't over yet. They had to disable the rest of the fleet's systems before the shutdown was complete, and there was no guarantee that the fleet would remain paused for long. This was just the first step. "Get ready to move," Zarin ordered. "We need to disable the fleet entirely before they can reboot. Stay sharp." The crew quickly regrouped, weapons at the ready. They had made it this far, but the real battle was just beginning. The fleet may have been paused, but it wasn't destroyed. Zarin knew they would have to fight through more than just ships. They had to fight the ancient systems themselves, systems that had been designed to stop anyone who tried to take control. As Zarin and his crew exited the control room, they could hear the hum of the fleet outside, its weapons dormant for now. But the enemy was not far behind. They could hear the low growls of machinery shifting, as though the fleet was preparing for the next phase. The real question was whether they would be ready. Outside, the sky was filled with the shadows of the ancient ships, hovering silently, their presence dominating the horizon. Zarin felt a rush of adrenaline, and despite the overwhelming odds, he knew one thing for certain: they couldn't afford to fail now. "Let's finish this," Zarin muttered. And so, with the stakes higher than ever, they moved forward, prepared to fight not just for their survival, but for the future of Earth itself. The reawakening. The air outside the chamber was thick with tension. Zarin and his crew had managed to stop the immediate threat, but it wasn't enough. The ancient fleet still loomed overhead, suspended in the sky like a monstrous shadow, waiting. The energy from the weapons could still be felt vibrating through the ground, even though the systems had been paused. Zarin's mind raced as he led his team through the narrow corridors of the facility. They had disabled the most dangerous part of Earth's defense system, but there were still countless other layers to go through. Every hallway they passed seemed to be leading them deeper into the unknown, and the pressure was mounting. They needed to act quickly before the fleet reactivated. As they reached the next control room, Zarin felt his pulse quicken. The doors slid open to reveal a massive console, much larger than the last one. It stretched across the entire wall, filled with complex, glowing symbols. The air in the room seemed charged with energy, and Zarin could feel the static on his skin. "This is it," he muttered. "This is where we finish it." His crew spread out, taking up positions around the room. Every soldier knew the stakes. They could either end this here and now or lose everything. The first steps toward Earth's salvation had been taken, but Zarin wasn't naive enough to think it would be easy. The ancient fleet was far from ordinary. Even with the shutdown sequence in motion, the fleet still had its own mechanisms to reboot. Zarin approached the console. His fingers hovered over the keys, unsure of what he might find. The last few sequences had been difficult to interpret, but this felt different, more alien, more powerful. The text on the screen was even more complicated than before, with symbols he didn't recognize. But there was no time to waste. Zarin pressed a series of buttons, hoping for the best. The console came alive, lights flickering as the system acknowledged his presence. Suddenly, the entire room shook. The walls groaned under the pressure, and Zarin knew they were running out of time. "They're rebooting," one of his officers shouted from across the room. "The fleet is coming back online." A feeling of dread washed over Zarin. They couldn't afford another round of attacks. The defense system had to be fully deactivated, or they would be wiped out in seconds. Zarin slammed his hand onto the console's main interface. "Stop it. We need to finish this now." For a moment, the console flashed in response, the symbols shifting as if debating whether or not to comply. Then, without warning, the entire facility seemed to come alive. The lights flickered and dimmed, and a low, eerie hum began to fill the room. "We've triggered something," one of his soldiers yelled. "The system's resisting." Zarin's heart pounded. They weren't just trying to deactivate the fleet anymore. The system itself had become self-aware. It was no longer simply a defense, it was fighting back. The lights above them began to flicker wildly, and the sound of mechanical whirring grew louder. It was clear now that the system had not only activated the fleet's weapons, but had also begun to mobilize its own defenses, things that Zarin had never expected. A door to the left suddenly opened, and a strange mechanical creature emerged from the shadows. It was large, towering over Zarin and his crew. Its body was a blend of metal and some other unknown material, and its eyes glowed with an eerie red light. The creature advanced slowly, its heavy footsteps echoing through the chamber. "Get ready," Zarin ordered. "Defend the console. We can't let it stop us now." The soldiers raised their weapons, firing at the creature, but their shots bounced harmlessly off its metal skin. The machine took another step forward, unfazed by their attempts to stop it. Zarin quickly scanned the room, looking for something, anything, that could help. Suddenly, a small panel on the wall to the right lit up. Zarin rushed over and ripped it open, revealing a series of switches and levers. He pulled one of the levers, hoping it would somehow disrupt the creature's function. There was a brief moment of silence, and then the creature halted in its tracks. The red light in its eyes flickered as though it were confused. "We've done it," Zarin yelled. "Keep it off balance. We've almost got this." But the victory was short-lived. As soon as the creature faltered, two more emerged from hidden doors, their metallic bodies gleaming in the dim light. The system had already begun to defend itself. Zarin glanced at the main console. There were still several codes flashing across the screen. This wasn't just about shutting down the fleet. It was about stopping the system itself from self-repairing. If they didn't do it now, they would be facing not just the fleet, but an endless wave of defense mechanisms. "Commander, look!" one of the soldiers shouted. "It's the shutdown sequence. It's activating." The console was finally responding. The glowing symbols were shifting rapidly now, and Zarin could almost hear the clicks and whirs of the ancient machines as they prepared to power down. But then, another explosion. This time, it wasn't from the fleet outside. The explosion rocked the entire facility, and the lights went out, plunging them into complete darkness. Zarin's heart stopped for a moment, his senses overwhelmed by the silence that followed. Before he could react, the mechanical creatures moved again. The low hum of their internal engines was now all he could hear. He felt the cold breath of one of them brushing past him as it took another step closer. He knew they had to make one last push. They couldn't afford to wait any longer. Earth's last line of defense had reawakened, and it would stop at nothing to destroy anyone who threatened it. Zarin gritted his teeth. Finish this. Now. The final showdown. The facility was plunged into darkness, and for a few long seconds, all that Zarin could hear was the relentless hum of the ancient machines. The mechanical creatures were close now, their movements deliberate and threatening. Zarin could feel their presence in the air, as if every shadow in the room was alive and waiting to strike. The lights were still out, and his crew had only their senses to rely on. "Commander," one of the soldiers shouted from behind him. "We've got to move now. They're everywhere." Zarin felt his pulse race. The machines had reawakened, and now the room seemed like a maze of darkness and deadly threats. There was no room for hesitation. This was the final chance to stop Earth's defense system from fully rebooting. "Get to the console. We've almost got it," Zarin commanded, his voice steady despite the chaos around him. His team moved quickly, weapons at the ready, but the weight of the moment was heavy. The creatures that guarded the system were relentless. Their bodies seemed to glow faintly in the dark, casting strange, flickering shadows on the walls. Zarin's fingers found the console's controls again, but the familiar symbols were no longer on the screen. The system had changed, becoming even more complex, as if it were adapting to their every move. He could hear the soft whir of the machines coming closer, and he knew that time was running out. Another explosion shook the building, sending debris falling from the ceiling. Zarin barely flinched. There was no room for fear now, only action. The red lights flickered back on for just a moment, and Zarin saw the machines closing in on his crew. The air was thick with tension. If they didn't disable the fleet now, they would lose everything. The systems outside were still recharging, and once they did, it would be too late. He slammed his hand onto the console, fingers moving faster than ever before, desperately searching for a solution. The symbols on the screen blurred as Zarin's mind raced, trying to piece together the remaining codes. Finally, a string of symbols appeared, clear and precise, as if the system was offering him one last chance. But it was a trap. Zarin knew this. His instincts told him the system wanted to make them believe they were close to success. He had no choice. He had to act quickly. "Hold them off," Zarin yelled to his crew. "I'm initiating the final sequence." The soldiers spread out, firing their weapons as the mechanical creatures advanced. The energy blasts crackled through the air, but it wasn't enough to stop them. The creatures were far too strong. Zarin could see them closing in, their glowing red eyes fixed on him. He took a deep breath and entered the final sequence. The console hummed louder, vibrating beneath his fingertips. The machines roared in response, but Zarin didn't stop. He could feel the pressure building. Every moment, every second was critical. Then, the room suddenly went silent. For a brief moment, it was as if time had stopped. Zarin opened his eyes. The console had gone dark. "Did we do it?" someone asked, their voice shaking with uncertainty. Zarin's heart pounded as he stared at the screen, his fingers still hovering over the controls. He couldn't believe it. Had it worked? The room remained still, tense, and silent. Then, something unexpected happened. A loud clank echoed from deep within the facility, followed by a series of mechanical sounds as if something huge was moving. The floor trembled beneath Zarin's feet, and the lights flickered once more. The ancient machines outside the facility were silent now. The fleet had stopped moving. The threat, for the first time in hours, had paused. Zarin's fingers trembled, and a deep sigh of relief escaped his lips. But just as they thought it was over, the console's screen came to life again, flashing with one final message. "System override complete. Emergency protocols engage. Self-destruction imminent." The air was sucked from the room. Zarin felt his stomach drop. "What is this?" one of the officers screamed. "What's happening now?" "We triggered the fail-safe," Zarin realized, his mind racing. "The system has started its self-destruct sequence. We've got to get out of here. Now." The sound of alarms filled the room, and the walls began to shake. A deep, growling sound rumbled through the ground. The emergency lights blinked on and off, casting eerie, shifting shadows. It was clear. The facility was going to explode, and they had no time to waste. "Move, move, move," Zarin shouted, pushing his team toward the exit. The mechanical creatures, still standing near the entrance, had paused momentarily, but Zarin knew they would be activated again the moment the self-destruction countdown hit 0. They couldn't afford to be slowed down. They ran down the hallway, the sound of their footsteps echoing against the walls. The exit was close. It had to be. The facility was crumbling behind them, but Zarin had no choice but to push forward. As they finally reached the massive doors leading out of the building, they slid open to reveal a world in chaos. The sky above was darkened by the looming fleet, still frozen in the air, waiting for the moment when it could unleash its full power once more. "We're not out of danger yet," Zarin muttered, looking up at the ominous ships above. But they had done it. They had disabled the fleet. For now. The self-destruction sequence was their final hurdle, but it wasn't over. The galaxy's most powerful defense system had been activated, but Earth's ancient fleet had been stopped, at least for the moment. The future of the planet hung in the balance, and Zarin could only hope that their sacrifice had been enough.